I need to tell you something about Pisces energy that most astrology content completely misses. And I'm not talking about the surface level descriptions you've read 1,000 times: the dreamy artist, the escapist, the emotional sponge. No, what I'm about to share with you goes much deeper than that. And if you're a Pisces or have significant Pisces placements in your chart, what you're about to discover will fundamentally change how you understand your own existence. Here's what nobody tells you. Pisces doesn't just feel emotions. Pisces experiences reality through a completely different perceptual filter than the other 11 signs. While most people navigate the world through their 5 physical senses, Pisces operates on a 6th sense that's constantly receiving transmissions from dimensions most people don't even know exist. And this isn't mystical nonsense. This is about how your nervous system is literally wired differently. How your mirror neurons fire with an intensity that neuroscience is only beginning to understand. Have you noticed something lately? A particular kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. A feeling that you're carrying weight that isn't even yours. Maybe you walk into a room and immediately know something is wrong, even though everyone is smiling. Maybe you have dreams that come true, or you think of someone seconds before they text you. Maybe you feel other people's pain in your own body, their anxiety in your chest, their sadness in your throat, their anger as a pressure behind your eyes. If you're nodding right now, if your body is responding with recognition, then you already know what I'm talking about. You've already felt it. That's the Pisces frequency. And right now, in this particular moment of collective human evolution, that frequency is being activated in ways it hasn't been for decades. Let me be extremely precise about what's happening. Pisces is the 12th sign, the final sign of the Zodiac. It represents the dissolution of boundaries, the return to source, the place where all individual drops of water merge back into the ocean. In psychological terms, Pisces governs the collective unconscious, that vast reservoir of shared human experience, ancestral memory, and archetypal patterns that Carl Jung spent his life trying to map. When you have strong Pisces energy, you don't just dip your toe into that ocean. You live in it. You breathe it. You are constantly swimming through currents of collective emotion, picking up on frequencies that most people have learned to filter out. This is not a metaphor. Recent research in neuroscience has shown that highly empathetic individuals and Pisces natives consistently score off the charts on empathy assessments, have more active mirror neuron systems. These are the neurons that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing that same action. They're the biological basis of empathy. The reason you wince when you see someone get hurt. The mechanism that allows you to feel what others feel. In Pisces individuals, this system appears to operate with the sensitivity of a seismograph, picking up tremors that others don't even register. But here's where it gets really interesting. And this is the part that changes everything. That sensitivity isn't a flaw. It's not something you need to fix or overcome or learn to suppress. Rather than saying Pisces is too sensitive, it's far more accurate to say that Pisces has access to information channels that are simply unavailable to most other people. You're not broken. You're receiving data that others are blind to. Think about it this way. Imagine you're in a room with 10 people, and 9 of them can only see visible light. But you can see infrared and ultraviolet too. Those 9 people might tell you you're seeing things that aren't there, that you're being overly sensitive, that you need to toughen up and see the world the way they do. But you're not hallucinating. You're simply perceiving a broader spectrum of reality. That's what Pisces energy does. It expands your perceptual bandwidth to include emotional frequencies, energetic signatures, and intuitive downloads that operate outside the normal range of human consciousness. Now, does this resonate with you? Have you spent years being told you're too much? Too emotional? Too sensitive? Too dreamy? Have you been pathologized for gifts that our culture doesn't know how to value? Because here's the truth that nobody wants to say out loud. We live in a culture that is terrified of emotional depth. We live in a society that has built elaborate defense mechanisms against feeling too much, knowing too much, sensing too much. We've created entire industries designed to numb us, distract us, keep us operating on the surface level where everything is manageable and controllable and safe. And into this emotionally constipated culture comes Pisces, with its oceanic depths and its refusal to stay in the shallow end. And the culture doesn't know what to do with that except try to medicate it, minimize it, or mock it. But something is shifting, and if you've been feeling it, that strange combination of exhaustion and anticipation, that sense that something enormous is trying to break through, you're not imagining it. The collective consciousness is going through what I can only describe as a forced awakening, and Pisces energy is at the absolute center of that transformation. Let me explain the mechanics of what's happening. Pisces is ruled by Neptune, the planet of dissolution, transcendence, and spiritual awakening. Neptune moves incredibly slowly, spending approximately 14 years in each sign. Right now, Neptune is in Pisces, its home sign, a transit that only happens once every 165 years. This transit began in 2011 and continues until 2026. We are living through once in multiple lifetimes activation of Piscean consciousness, a period when the veil between the material and spiritual worlds is thinner than it has been in over a century and a half. What does this mean in practical terms? It means that the gifts that Pisces has always carried, intuition, empathy, psychic sensitivity, artistic vision, spiritual connection, are no longer fringe abilities. They're becoming survival skills. As our world becomes more complex, more interconnected, more overwhelming in its information density, the ability to navigate through intuition rather than logic alone, to sense truth beneath surface appearances, to feel into the emotional undercurrents of situations, these are the skills that will determine who thrives and who merely survives in the coming decades. And here's what makes this moment so critical. Pisces individuals are the advanced scouts of this new consciousness. You've been training for this your entire life, even though you probably didn't know it. Every time you felt too much and survived it. Every time you trusted your intuition against all logical advice and were proven right. Every time you picked up on something nobody else could see, you were developing the exact capacities that humanity as a whole is now being forced to develop. But, and this is crucial, you can't do this work if you're drowning in everyone else's emotions. You can't be of service if you're so overwhelmed by the collective pain that you can barely function. And this is where most Pisces get stuck. This is the trap that keeps you small, exhausted, and unable to fully step into your power. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like. You wake up feeling relatively okay, maybe even good. You have your morning routine, your coffee, your moment of peace. Then you check your phone. Immediately, you're hit with a wave of anxiety from the news, grief from a friend's post, anger from a political debate, despair from global events. You haven't even left your house yet, and you're already carrying the emotional weight of hundreds of people. You go to work or run errands, and you're picking up on your co-workers' hidden depression, the cashier's financial stress, the stranger's loneliness. By the time you get home, you're completely depleted, and you have no idea why, because you didn't actually do anything that strenuous. You just existed in the world. But for you, existing in the world means processing an enormous volume of emotional data that most people don't even register. This is what I call empathic overload, and it's the number one reason why Pisces individuals struggle with exhaustion, anxiety, depression, and what often gets misdiagnosed as chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia. Your nervous system is constantly in a state of hyperarousal, processing threats and emotions that aren't even yours. It's like having 50 browser tabs open at all times, each one streaming a different emotional frequency. And your system is trying to process all of them simultaneously. Does this sound familiar? Have you noticed that you feel better when you're alone? That crowds drain you. That you need significantly more downtime than other people just to feel normal. That's not weakness. That's not introversion, necessarily. That's your system trying to recover from the constant energetic input it's processing. Now here's where we get to the heart of the matter. The piece that will change everything if you can really hear it. Your empathy is not the problem. The problem is that nobody taught you how to work with it consciously. Nobody gave you the energetic hygiene practices you need to process all that input without it destroying you. You've been trying to function as a highly sensitive instrument in a world that treats sensitivity like a liability, and you've been doing it without any of the tools or training you actually need. Imagine you're a radio receiver. You're picking up hundreds of stations simultaneously. The solution is not to destroy the receiver or pretend you can't hear the signals. The solution is to learn how to tune the dial, how to focus on one frequency at a time, how to turn the volume down when you need to, and how to distinguish between the signal and the noise. That's what we're going to explore. Not how to stop being empathetic, that would be like asking you to stop breathing, but how to work with your empathy as the sophisticated spiritual technology it actually is. Because here's what happens when a Pisces learns to master their gifts rather than being mastered by them. You become a force of nature. You become someone who can walk into any situation and immediately understand the emotional dynamics at play. You become a healer, not because you're trying to be, but because your very presence helps people feel seen, understood, and less alone. You become an artist who creates work that touches something deep in the human soul because you're channeling from those collective waters. You become an intuitive who can sense opportunities and dangers before they fully manifest. You become a bridge between worlds. Someone who can translate spiritual truths into language that helps others wake up. This is your birthright. This is what you came here to do. But you can't do it if you're drowning. You can't be a bridge if you've collapsed under the weight of what you're carrying. So let's talk about what's actually required. Not positive thinking or surface-level self-care, but the deep structural changes that will allow you to function at your highest capacity without burning out. Because the world needs you right now. Not a diminished version of you. Not a version of you that's trying to be less sensitive or more normal. The world needs you at full power, and that means we need to completely restructure how you understand and work with your gifts. The first thing you need to understand is that Pisces operates on what I call the principle of energetic osmosis. Just like a cell membrane allows certain substances to pass through while keeping others out, you need to develop a conscious, selective permeability. Right now, most Pisces are functioning like a membrane with no selectivity whatsoever. Everything comes through. Your neighbor's marital problems, the collective anxiety about the economy, your mother's unexpressed grief from 30 years ago, the residual trauma in the building you work in, all of it flows into your system with equal force. And your nervous system treats all of it as if it's your responsibility to process and resolve. But here's the critical distinction that changes everything. Feeling something does not mean you have to fix it. Sensing someone's pain does not obligate you to take it on. Perceiving an emotional truth does not require you to sacrifice yourself to address it. This is the lie that most Pisces have internalized, usually from a very young age. You learned that your sensitivity made you valuable, that your ability to feel what others feel made you needed, and somewhere along the way, you confused empathy with martyrdom. Let me tell you about a client I worked with there. A Pisces sun with a Cancer moon. She was a therapist. Naturally, because so many Pisces end up in healing professions, she came to me completely burned out. On the edge of leaving her practice entirely. She described feeling like she was drowning in her client's pain, taking it home with her every night, waking up at 3 in the morning with anxiety that wasn't even hers. She had been taught, both in her training and through her own empathic nature, that good therapy meant feeling with your clients, holding space for their pain, being fully present to their suffering, and she was doing all of that beautifully. But nobody had taught her the other half of the equation, how to be present without merging, how to witness without absorbing, how to hold space without becoming the container for everyone else's unprocessed emotion. We worked together for 6 months, and what shifted for her wasn't her empathy. Her empathy actually deepened. What shifted was her understanding of energetic boundaries. She learned that she could feel everything her clients were feeling and still maintain a clear sense of where she ended and they began. She learned to consciously release their energy at the end of each session, rather than carrying it home in her body. She learned that her job wasn't to take their pain away but to help them develop their own capacity to be with it. And the transformation was remarkable. Not only did her burnout resolve, but her clients actually started making faster progress because she was no longer unconsciously enabling their dependence on her to process their emotions for them. This is what I mean by mastering your gifts rather than being mastered by them. It's not about becoming less empathetic. It's about becoming more conscious about how you work with the empathy you have. Now, let's go deeper into the mechanics of this. Because understanding how energy actually moves will give you the framework you need to work with it effectively. In traditional Chinese medicine, there's a concept called Wei Qi, which is your defensive energy field. It's the outermost layer of your energetic body, the boundary between you and the external world. In people with strong Pisces placements, this boundary is naturally more permeable, more fluid. It's like having a screen door instead of a solid door. This permeability is what gives you access to all that intuitive information. But it's also what makes you vulnerable to energetic overwhelm. The solution is not to build a concrete wall. If you try to shut down your sensitivity completely, you'll cut yourself off from the very source of your power. Instead, you need to learn to consciously modulate that boundary. Sometimes you need it more open, like when you're doing creative work or healing work or trying to understand a complex emotional situation. Other times you need it more closed, like when you're in a crowded space or dealing with someone who's energetically chaotic or trying to rest and restore your own system. Think of it like this. Your energetic boundary should function like the iris of an eye. In bright light, it contracts to protect the sensitive retina. In darkness, it opens wide to let in as much light as possible. It's constantly adjusting based on the environment and what's needed in the moment. That's the level of sophistication you're aiming for with your empathic abilities. Not on or off, but consciously calibrated to the situation at hand. Here's a practice that will fundamentally change how you move through the world. I want you to start asking yourself one question multiple times throughout the day. Is this mine? When you feel a wave of anxiety, pause and ask, is this mine? When you suddenly feel sad for no apparent reason, ask, is this mine? When you walk into a room and feel tension, is this mine? You'll be shocked at how often the answer is no. That anxiety might be coming from your co-worker 3 desks over. That sadness might be collective grief you're picking up from the news cycle. That tension might be residual energy from an argument that happened in that room hours before you arrived. And here's what's magical about this practice. The simple act of asking the question begins to create differentiation. It interrupts the automatic process of absorption. It gives you a moment of conscious choice. Because once you identify that an emotion isn't yours, you can make a different decision about what to do with it. You don't have to process it, fix it, or carry it. You can simply acknowledge it, bless it, and let it pass through without taking up residence in your body. But let's address the fear that comes up for most Pisces when they start to work with boundaries. There's a deep, often unconscious belief that if you stop absorbing everyone else's pain, you'll become cold, disconnected, less loving. You're afraid that boundaries will turn you into one of those people who can walk past suffering without feeling anything. And that terrifies you because your empathy is core to your identity. You've built your entire sense of self around being the person who feels, who cares, who shows up for others in their darkest moments. I need you to hear this. Boundaries do not diminish love. Boundaries make sustainable love possible. Without boundaries, your empathy becomes a wound that never heals, constantly reopened by every person and situation you encounter. With boundaries, your empathy becomes a gift you can offer from a place of fullness rather than depletion. The people in your life don't need you to suffer with them. They need you to be present, grounded, and resourced enough to hold space for their suffering without collapsing into it. There's a reason why the archetype of Pisces is to fish swimming in opposite directions. It represents the fundamental tension in Piscean consciousness. the pull toward merger and dissolution versus the need for individual integrity and boundaries. Most Pisces spend their lives being pulled apart by these two opposing forces, never quite finding the balance point. But the mastery comes when you realize you don't have to choose one or the other. You can be both deeply connected and clearly boundaried. You can feel everything and still maintain your center. You can swim in the collective ocean without losing yourself in it. Now let's talk about the second major challenge that Pisces faces. And this one is even more insidious because it masquerades as spirituality. I'm talking about the addiction to transcendence. The constant urge to escape the harsh realities of physical existence. Pisces is the sign most associated with escapism. And while that's usually discussed in terms of substance abuse or fantasy or avoidance, the real issue goes much deeper than that. Here's what's actually happening. Pisces has one foot in the material world and one foot in the spiritual realm. You're constantly aware of a reality beyond this one, a dimension where there's no suffering, no limitation, no harsh edges, and the material world, with all its pain and injustice and difficulty, can feel unbearably heavy by comparison. So there's this constant temptation to check out, to float away into dreams or substances or spiritual bypassing or any number of ways to avoid being fully present in your human experience. I see this all the time in Pisces individuals who are deeply spiritual but completely ungrounded. They can talk for hours about higher consciousness and unity and transcendence, but they can't pay their bills on time. They have profound mystical experiences, but their relationships are a mess. They're so focused on the spiritual realm that they're barely inhabiting their physical body, and then they wonder why they feel disconnected, anxious, and unable to manifest anything in the material world. Here's the hard truth. Your spirituality is not meant to be an escape from your humanity. It's meant to be integrated with it. The whole point of being a Pisces, of having this access to higher dimensions while incarnated in a physical body, is to bring those two worlds together. You're meant to be a bridge, remember? But you can't be a bridge if you're only standing on one side. This is where Pisces often get stuck in what I call the martyr-savior complex. Because you can feel everyone's pain so acutely, and because you have access to spiritual truths about unity and love and healing, you develop this unconscious belief that you're supposed to save everyone. You're supposed to take on their suffering, transmute it through your own system, and somehow alleviate the pain of the world through your personal sacrifice. And this belief is reinforced by religious and spiritual traditions that glorify suffering and self-sacrifice as the highest form of love. But let me be very clear about this. You are not here to be a martyr. You are not here to save anyone. You are not Jesus Christ. And trying to play that role will destroy you. The savior complex is actually a form of spiritual ego, a way of making yourself special and needed and important by positioning yourself as the one who can handle what others cannot. And it keeps you trapped in a cycle of depletion and resentment because no matter how much you give, it's never enough. There's always more suffering, always more people who need help, always more pain to absorb. The shift that needs to happen is from savior to witness, from martyr to mirror. Your job is not to take away anyone's pain. Your job is to be present with it, to reflect it back to them with compassion and clarity, and to help them find their own capacity to be with their experience. This is actually far more powerful than trying to fix or save, but it requires you to tolerate the discomfort of not being able to make everything better. It requires you to trust that other people have their own path, their own lessons, their own relationship with their suffering, and that your interference, no matter how well-intentioned, might actually be preventing them from developing the strength they need to navigate their own life. Have you noticed this pattern in yourself? The way you rush in to help before anyone even asks. The way you feel responsible for other people's emotional states. The way you exhaust yourself trying to make everyone around you comfortable and happy. That's not love. That's codependency dressed up as compassion. And it's keeping you from your real work. Because here's what happens when you stop trying to save everyone. You finally have the energy to do what you actually came here to do. And what you came here to do is not small. Pisces is the sign of the mystic. the visionary, the one who can perceive and articulate truths that exist beyond the rational mind. When you're not depleted from carrying everyone else's emotional baggage, when you're not scattered across 50 different people's problems, when you're actually grounded in your own body and connected to your own creative source, that's when the real magic happens. I've been working with Pisces individuals for years, and I can tell you that the ones who truly step into their power share one common trait. They've learned to channel their sensitivity into creation rather than absorption. They've stopped being passive receivers of everyone else's energy and become active transmitters of their own vision. And this is where we need to talk about the creative imperative that lies at the heart of Pisces consciousness. Pisces is ruled by Neptune, the planet of imagination, dreams, and artistic vision. This is not decorative. This is not a hobby. Your creativity is actually a survival mechanism, a way for your system to process and transmute the enormous volume of emotional and psychic information you're constantly receiving. When you're not creating, when you're not giving form to the formless, when you're not channeling all that sensitivity into something tangible, it backs up in your system like a clogged drain. That's when you get the depression, the anxiety, the sense of being overwhelmed by life. You're not depressed because something is wrong with you. You're depressed because you have a creative backlog that needs to move through you and out into the world. Think about the greatest Pisces artist throughout history. Michelangelo, who painted the Sistine Chapel and saw angels in blocks of marble. Who channels raw emotion into music that millions of people feel in their bodies. Kurt Cobain, whose music gave voice to a generation's pain and alienation. These individuals weren't just talented, they were conduits. They learned to take the overwhelming flood of feeling that comes with Pisces consciousness and give it form, structure, beauty. They learned to transform their sensitivity from a burden into a gift that served not just themselves but the collective. And here's what nobody tells you about this process. You don't create to feel better. You create because you must. Because the alternative is to be crushed under the weight of all that unexpressed energy. Your creativity is not separate from your empathy. It's the other side of the same coin. You feel deeply so that you can express deeply. You perceive truths that others miss so that you can articulate them in ways that help others see. You swim in the collective unconscious so that you can bring back treasures that illuminate the human experience. But most Pisces never fully claim this. They dabble in creativity. They have journals full of poems they've never shared, songs they've never recorded, paintings they've never shown anyone. They tell themselves they're not good enough, not talented enough, not original enough, and meanwhile, they're drowning in unexpressed creative energy that has nowhere to go. Do you see the tragedy in this? You have a gift that the world desperately needs, and you're keeping it locked inside because you're afraid of being seen, afraid of being judged, afraid of taking up space. Let me tell you what's really happening when you hide your creative work. You're not being humble. You're not protecting yourself. You're actually betraying your soul's purpose. Because your creativity is not about you. It's about what wants to come through you. There are songs that need to be sung, stories that need to be told, visions that need to be painted, and you are the vessel through which they want to enter the world. When you refuse to create, when you silence that voice, you're not just hurting yourself. You're depriving the collective of medicine it needs. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking about all the practical reasons why you can't fully commit to your creative path. The bills that need to be paid. The responsibilities you have. The people who depend on you. You're thinking that creativity is a luxury. Something you'll get to when you have more time, more money, more energy. But here's the truth that will set you free. Your creativity is not separate from your survival. It is your survival when you're creating, when you're channeling, when you're in that flow state where you lose track of time and self. That's when you're most alive, most yourself, most connected to source. That's when your nervous system finally gets to rest because instead of processing everyone else's energy, you're expressing your own. I'm not saying you need to quit your job tomorrow and become a starving artist. I'm saying you need to stop treating your creativity like it's optional. You need to give it the same priority you give to eating, sleeping, and breathing. Because, energetically, it is that essential. Even if it's just 30 minutes a day. Even if it's just a few lines in a journal or a sketch on a napkin. You need to create a consistent practice of moving energy from the inside out. This is not self-indulgence. This is energetic hygiene. This is how you keep your channels clear so you don't get backed up and overwhelmed. Now let's talk about the third piece of this puzzle. And this is the one that most Pisces resist the most fiercely. The necessity of discernment. Because Pisces is associated with unconditional love, with seeing the divine in everyone, with compassion that extends to all beings. There's often a resistance to making judgments or distinctions. You want to believe that everyone deserves your time, your energy, your empathy. You want to believe that all paths are equally valid, that all people are doing their best, that love means accepting everything and everyone without discrimination. But here's what that belief actually creates. It makes you a target for every energy vampire, every narcissist, every person who's looking for someone to dump their unprocessed trauma onto. Because people can sense your openness, your willingness to hold space, your reluctance to set boundaries or say no. And the ones who are most damaged, most desperate, most unwilling to do their own healing work, they will find you. They will attach to you like barnacles to a ship. And they will drain you dry if you let them. This is not about becoming cold or judgmental. This is about recognizing that your energy is precious, that your empathy is a finite resource, and that you have a responsibility to be strategic about where you direct it. Not everyone deserves access to your gifts. Not every situation requires your intervention. Not every person who's suffering is your responsibility to heal. And learning to discern the difference between a genuine call for help and someone trying to use you as an emotional dumping ground is one of the most important skills you can develop. Here's how you know the difference. When someone genuinely wants help, they're willing to do the work. They're asking for guidance, for tools, for support in their own healing process. They're not asking you to fix them or save them or take their pain away. They're asking you to walk beside them while they do the hard work of transformation. Those are the people worth your energy. Those are the relationships that will nourish you even as you give. But when someone just wants to complain, to vent, to tell you the same story over and over without ever taking any action to change their situation, that's not a call for help. That's an energy drain. And you need to learn to recognize it and protect yourself from it. This doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a wise person. It makes you someone who understands that enabling someone's victimhood is not the same as supporting their healing. I had a Pisces client who was in a friendship that had become completely one-sided. Her friend would call her at all hours, crying about the same relationship problems she'd been having for years, never taking any of the advice my client offered, never making any changes, just using my client as an emotional release valve. And my client felt guilty even thinking about setting boundaries because she believed that real love meant being available no matter what. That a good friend never turns away someone in pain. We worked on helping her see that what she was doing wasn't actually helping her friend. By being endlessly available. By absorbing all that pain without requiring any accountability or growth. She was actually enabling her friend to stay stuck. She was making it comfortable for her friend to avoid doing her own emotional work because she always had my client to process it for her. When my client finally set a boundary, when she said, "I love you, but I can't keep having these same conversations unless you're willing to take action to change your situation," something shifted. Her friend was angry at first, felt abandoned, accused my client of not caring. But within a few months, that friend started therapy, ended the toxic relationship she'd been complaining about, and actually thanked my client for loving her enough to stop enabling her. That's what real compassion looks like. Not endless tolerance of dysfunction, but a willingness to hold people accountable to their own growth. Not absorbing their pain, but reflecting it back to them with love and clarity so they can see what they need to see. Not saving them, but trusting them to save themselves. And here's what happens when you start practicing this level of discernment. You suddenly have so much more energy. You're not scattered across a dozen different people's dramas. You're not carrying weight that isn't yours. You're not exhausted from trying to fix situations that aren't your responsibility to fix. You're clear, focused, grounded in your own center. And from that place, you can actually be of much greater service because you're giving from overflow rather than depletion. This brings us to the final piece, the one that integrates everything we've talked about. And this is about understanding your role in the collective awakening that's happening right now. Because whether you realize it or not, you are part of something much larger than your individual life. The sensitivity you carry, the intuitive gifts you have, the ability to perceive beyond the veiled. These are not random traits. They're part of your assignment, your contribution to the evolution of human consciousness. We are living through a time of unprecedented change. The old structures are crumbling. The old ways of being are no longer sustainable. Humanity is being forced to evolve, to develop new capacities, to remember ancient wisdom that we've forgotten. And Pisces energy is at the center of this transformation because Pisces holds the memory of unity, the knowing that we are all connected. That separation is an illusion. That love is the fundamental force of the universe. But here's the critical piece. You can't help humanity evolve if you're barely surviving. You can't be a lighthouse if your own light is flickering. You can't guide others through the darkness if you're lost in it yourself. This is why everything we've talked about, the boundaries, the energetic hygiene, the creative expression, the discernment, all of it is not just about your personal well-being. It's about preparing you to do the work you came here to do. And that work is not small. It's not about being nice or helpful or making people comfortable. It's about being a frequency holder, someone who maintains a connection to higher consciousness even when the world around you is chaotic and fearful. It's about being a truth teller, someone who can see through illusions and speak what needs to be spoken even when it's uncomfortable. It's about being a bridge builder, someone who can help others access the spiritual dimensions that you naturally perceive. It's about being a healer, not in the sense of fixing people, but in the sense of helping them remember their own wholeness. This is your birthright as a Pisces. This is what you signed up for, and the world needs you to step into it fully. Not someday when you feel ready, but now. Because the time is now. The collective is crying out for the gifts you carry. People are waking up, asking questions, seeking meaning, trying to make sense of a world that no longer makes sense through purely rational means. They need guides who can help them navigate the spiritual dimensions of existence. They need artists who can give form to the formless. They need empaths who can help them learn to feel again after years of numbing out. They need you, but you have to choose it. You have to stop playing small. Stop hiding. Stop pretending that your sensitivity is a weakness rather than a superpower. You have to stop waiting for permission or validation or the perfect circumstances. You have to claim your gifts, develop your skills, and step into your role as a conscious channel for higher consciousness. Not because you're special or chosen or better than anyone else, but because this is what you came here to do, and the world is waiting. So here's what I want you to take away from everything we've explored together. Your empathy is not a flaw. Your sensitivity is not something to overcome. Your intuition is not imagination. Your creativity is not optional. Your boundaries are not selfish. Your discernment is not judgment. You are not too much. You are not broken. You are not crazy. You are a Pisces. And that means you are a bridge between worlds. A translator of the invisible. A keeper of ancient wisdom. A channel for divine love. And it's time to stop apologizing for that and start embodying it fully. The exhaustion you've been feeling is not because there's something wrong with you. It's because you've been trying to function in a world that doesn't understand your gifts, using strategies that were never designed for someone with your level of sensitivity. But now you know better.